If you have access to a 3D printer, you can copy and paste real-life objects to make as many as you want for mere pennies of filament. This won't just save you cash, and it won't just lighten your local landfill. In a world where fat cat billionaires lick their lips as we break our crap and buy their even crappier crap, the ability to repair, replace, and even upgrade your property on your terms is like a superpower. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take basic tools you probably already own and clone a gizmo so thoroughly it won't just replace the original, you'll probably improve it. Even if you've never designed a 3D model or even used a 3D printer, copying objects you already own could be the finest way to build experience. Besides, almost no manufacturers even sell spare parts anymore, so this could be your only way to get more. That's why I'm making this video. Cloning real-life products for personal use is almost always legal, even if you share the files. Copyright does not protect a concept, it protects a specific creative work. And besides, any element that's functional isn't covered by a copyright at all. That would be the domain of patents, and even if the thing you're copying is patented, a patent only prohibits selling that invention, not copying it. Your biggest hazards are actually trademarks, so never under any circumstances put anyone else's logo on your work and never title your creation with someone else's brand or product name. So if I were to hypothetically copy a hot swap hard disk sled for a Rosewell RSV 4000 server case, I can only say mine is compatible with a Rosewell RSV 4000 server case. I can't say it is a Rosewell sled, and I can't say it's an RSV 4000 sled, because it is neither. This also isn't a hypothetical. I will in fact copy a Rosewell RSV 4000 hard disk sled to complete the network attached storage server I almost finished in my last episode. I picked a case with hot swap hard disk cages. The idea is I can slot in fresh storage a la minute instead of having to buy and ration out a lifetime supply of screwed in hard disks. Actually procuring that case was a living nightmare, but the real problem came afterwards. To install a drive in one of these hot swap bays, it needs to be mounted to a latching plastic caddy called a sled, and while each hot swap cage comes with 4 of these preloaded, that is all you get. The manufacturer Rosewell straight up does not sell spare sleds. You'd think an OEM that designed, manufactured, and sold an expensive rack mount server case with detachable modular storage as its first class feature would sell additional detachable modules into which one could place storage. But Rosewell clearly did not think at all. Speaking of refusing to sell things or take your business seriously, I don't charge for any of my 3D models, I barely make any ad revenue, and I have never planned to put useful information behind a masterclass paywall. I have the privilege of making things specifically to give away because of generous supports from thinking of 3D printing. I am generously supported by patrons and sponsors. If you like what you see in this video and you think other people should see it too, hit subscribe and support the channel at patreon.com/Zack Freedman. This episode is sponsored by ArcStem, a small startup with a massive mission to make making projects so exciting the world will forget to doom scroll. Imagine social media, except instead of brain rot, bullshit, and trolls, you see passion projects handmade by hobbyists who are equally curious about the things you're building. Like, for instance, Mateo Tech Lab's Jarvis HUD, a homemade sci-fi dashboard projected on a wall and controlled with a touchless 3D camera. Other sites only want to show you finished projects. It's why my project building channel rarely shows me actually building projects. So many normies will instantly hit skip, the algorithm stops showing anything I make to anybody. But ArcStem is built for folks who want to see the whole process, fighting through setbacks, escaping dead ends, unpicking technical puzzles. It's how real projects really happen, and that process is what makes the magic moment where everything finally comes together so uniquely glorious. Arc is assembling an endless feed of inspirational inventions made by and for independent creators just like you. Whatever state your thing is in, I guarantee you people are interested. So if you're sick of draining your brain with depressing, pointless vertical videos, if you need more positivity, more motivation to finish your works in progress, or if you're just curious about what other makers are making right now, visit arc-stem.com or click the link in the description. That's ark-stem.com. Thanks to ArcStem for sponsoring this video and empowering the entire creative community. What I'm showing you in this video can absolutely be shared in ArcStem right after we finish it. What do you say we get back to that? So my new storage server has 8 flimsy, fragile hard disk caddies, but I have 26 disks that need them. The only way to square this circle, besides buying a bunch of hot swap cages and throwing out the cage part, is to make my own, with hookers and blackjack, and colors and labels and stronger latches and better fit and finish, and protective sleeves and Gridfinity racks, because it's my model and I can do whatever the hell I want with it. All I have to do is get its geometry into Fusion 360. When you pick something to clone, you can't be too ambitious. Hobbyist 3D printers can only make chunks of plastic, and the chunks aren't particularly strong or smooth. Circuit boards, custom metal, and anything crystal clear are out of the question. Your 3D printed copy will also look 3D printed unless you are a Bondo god. Some of these tips do apply to more free-form organic objects, like your mom, but this guide is intended for solid modeling, like your dad. These hard disk sleds are nothing but right angles and simple arcs, and they're just 3 pieces of injection molded ABS plastic. When it comes to copying something with a 3D printer, that is as good as it gets. So let's triage the patient on the operating table. The drive sled is an assembly of 3 plastic parts. We have a main body frame, a swiveling lever, and a sliding latch. You mount the hard disk itself using these countersunk holes peppered all over the frame, and because different drives need different holes, we'll need to copy each one carefully. A small spring holds the latch down to prevent accidental ejection, but press it in and a bigger spring pops the lever open for easy grabbing. It has no other hardware, including screws. The lever's hinge, the latch's backstop, and everything else is molded right into the plastic and snap fit or ultrasonically welded together. These springy side rails are molded separately and welded to the frame. They seem to serve triple duty. They guide the sled into its slot, they brace it against the cage walls, and they absorb vibration coming off the hard disk. As the sled bottoms out in its slot, this little tab on the lever grabs a corresponding hole in the hot swap cage. As you push the lever closed, it locks the sled in place and latches the lever down for safety. It's a very sparse and economical design, not exactly what you hope to see on a $400 server case. Here's the game plan. First, we're going to thoroughly photograph the object from each and every angle. Next, we'll trace the pics to create dimensional drawings. Then we'll rough out a model and refine it through test fitting. 4th step, question marks. 5th step, no profit. Selling things heavily influenced by other people's designs raises all kinds of issues and exposes you to all kinds of problems. But we will share the files, and we will even finish it up by throwing in some accessories. You might be worried I'll whip out a 3D scanner, but all we need is a regular old 2-dimensional camera, even the one you're watching this on right now as you poop. You will also need calipers, a short ruler with clear markings, a bubble level, a clean place to shoot photos, and lots of light. You're going to want a CAD program that lets you import photos. I'm going to use Fusion 360, no 360 anymore. They comped my license, so I am biased, but it is genuinely an excellent choice for jobs like this. Of course, we can't forget the 3D printer. As long as it's decently calibrated and it's big enough to fit your thing, or big enough that you can split your thing into pieces and fit those, it's probably going to do the job. I should also add, you want filament, not resin. In general, resin just isn't fast, strong, or accurate enough to copy and replace objects that are usually injection molded in a fairly tough polymer. Grab a few kilos of the cheapest white or clear PLA you can get your hands on. White or clear. Not colored, not silk, white or clear. Make sure it's cheap. Make sure it's PLA. Don't get too attached to it, most of it's going in the trash. Now that we're fully equipped, let's prep the patient. Place the object on a contrasting surface and light it from all angles. The fewer shadows, the better. If you're light on light, you might have better results shooting outside on an overcast day. Place the bubble level on your object and shim it with blue tack or folded up paper till it's dead level. Replace the bubble level with the ruler, laying flat on the tallest surface. Open your camera app and disable autofocus, sharpening, and all filters, especially those with AI. We want our picture to be of the thing we're copying, not what an AI thinks the thing we're copying is supposed to look like. Certain bitch-ass phone makers, mostly named Samsung, don't always let you disable all the filters, so you may need to download a de-shittified alternative from El Apstorio. Enable optical stabilization, force the flash to fire regardless of light level, and crank the ISO till the image is almost blown out. Finally, dial in the fastest exposure that still lets you crisply make out the edges. Due to camera nerd shit I barely understand, you want to use a telephoto lens, which your phone might call the zoom lens. You're gonna have to put some height between yourself and the object. You might have to stand on a step stool, grab a tripod, or have one of those super shady Turkish surgical tourism outfits that keep trying to sponsor my channel make your legs longer. Next, we're gonna frame the shot. You want the camera dead level, pointed at the floor, with the object dead center and a generous amount of dead space on all four sides. Resist the urge to fill the frame with the object. I know you're wasting pixels, trust me. The closer the image gets to the edge of the frame, the more distorted it's going to be by either the lens or whatever algorithm the phone uses to reverse lens distortion. It also doesn't matter if the object is turned slightly, we are going to rotate it later. Set the focus on the ruler, not the object, the ruler, and finally take the shot using the self-timer. Don't use the shutter button. If you tap the screen or click the volume, your finger is going to wiggle the camera. You still might, so take a few redundant safety shots just in case. Then, if there's another surface on the side at a different height, move the ruler, refocus the camera, and repeat. Because of perspective, each shot is only good for one height, and you will have to move the ruler to measure it accurately. Once this side is thoroughly photographed, turn the object to another side, level it out, add the ruler, and adjust the lights if it's shadowy. Take that picture, move the ruler to another surface if you have to, and lather, rinse, and repeat till you've covered every height of every angle. Once you're done shooting, get the pics onto your computer and pick out the crispiest copy of each shot. You want high contrast and sharp edges that make it very clear where the object ends and the floor begins. Don't be afraid to go back and reshoot with better lighting or tighter focus. Fire up your CAD program. It's time to get tracing. I'm going to assume you're also using Fusion, and I'm not going to translate its idiosyncratic jargon. If you use another CAD suite, I don't know, just look at the picture and assemble it the same, bro. Start a new project, add a canvas, and load your first picture. I like to start with the bottom surface on the XY plane. Remember to rotate and flip the canvas if necessary. We are on the bottom looking upwards. Don't worry about the scale or position just yet, but do rotate the image so it's square with the axes. You might need to backtrack, add a sketch, and draw some construction lines to give yourself more to compare. If you can't line up certain edges because they're slightly curved, that might be lens distortion. You'll have to reshoot that picture with the camera held further away from the object. If it's still curved, the object might just be curved. Once you've got the angle of the dangle, hit calibrate, click the left edge of 2 tick marks on the ruler, and type in that actual length. Fusion will automatically resize the canvas to make it 1:1 scale. Now start a new sketch on the same plane and trace that shit up. It doesn't need to be perfect, but the tighter the better. Real objects have curves, so if yours does, try to approximate them using circular arcs, because Fusion lets you set dimensions for them. Lines at 90-degree angles should be perpendicular, broken lines should be collinear, rows of holes should sit on construction lines, arcs should be tangential, evenly spaced geometry should be a rectangular pattern, things in circles should be a circular pattern, centered stuff should be on midpoints, symmetrical stuff should be mirrored, redundant dimensions should be replaced with equals constraints. You get the idea. These relationships are very important because they make it hard to screw stuff up. Hit auto constrain to populate it with dummy dimensions and guess all the remaining constraints. However, if it says auto, you can never trust it, so review the constraints carefully, tweak them to make sense, and don't be afraid to add your own. The auto-generated dimensions are only estimates, so bust out your calipers and turn those estimates into measurements. Do not build in tolerance and clearance. Keep things simple and just type in the actual values you measure. These sketches are going to be a lot more useful if they are true to the original item. Calipers have a hard time measuring chamfers, so I also recommend printing a set of radius gauges, or even buying some. Ugh. Bear in mind, auto-constrain does not actually know how humans measure things, so it will place dimensions that are too impractical to actually measure. Don't struggle with these. Replace the auto-generated dimensions with more convenient equivalents, even if that means modifying the sketch. For instance, you can't use calipers to measure the distance between 2 circle center points. Instead, you measure the shortest distance between their edges. Fusion will never do this because it requires you to add a construction line and points, and I don't believe auto-constrain will ever add sketch features. Any kind of so-called artificial intelligence has no concept of the real-world context or requirements you're operating in. It's just faking it by making assumptions based on copying other people's work. And remember, most people are dumb. As you flesh out your dimensions, your drawing will start to deviate from the photo. That's completely fine. Don't worry, go with it. A measurement always beats a photograph, and a photograph always beats theory. The difference between theory and practice is for losers who don't build anything. Once every line is black, which is to say fully constrained, we shall perform a dark ritual of professional prototyping.
The sacrifice of filament.
Close the sketch and extrude the whole thing 0.5 millimeter. Save the project, write the version number on a post-it note, and slap that note on your printer. While you're there, load that shitty white or clear PLA you bought earlier. Then we'll take that thin extruded sketch and we'll print it in the detailed profile at 0.15 millimeter resolution. When the job is done, which shouldn't take very long, it is only 3 layers, let the bed cool, write the version number from the post-it directly onto the print, chuck the note in the trash, and carefully peel off the print. Now lay that thin filmy print directly onto the surface you're copying. If you used white or clear filament like I recommended, it should be translucent enough to spot boo-boos right through the print and maybe even measure them. Mark any deviations with a Sharpie and then fix them one by one. Whenever you resolve an issue, put a circle around it, and if you decide not to make one of the changes you marked, cross it out. Once every single item is circled or crossed, write done on the print and throw it in the trash. It might feel bad to destroy things you worked on, and if that's the case, feel bad and do it anyways. Yes, we are going to print a lot of objects specifically to throw them out. And yes, that is wasteful, and we are doing it intentionally. Intentionally wasting a few hours and 100 grams of filament can easily carve off days of rework and entire spools of full-size rejects. Don't keep your old prototypes, chuck it. If you mix up an old prototype with a recent one, you might end up fixing problems you've already fixed, and your model is now wrong in the other direction. The reason we're drawing all over our models is to add a second layer of protection. We're gonna pile garbage on our desks, we're gonna forget our to-do lists, we're gonna be lazy, sloppy, and generally stupid. We're gonna fuck it up. Instead of making impossible promises to do better, we'll just coat the confusing items in the information that resolves the confusion with a Sharpie. If this side has details on multiple heights, like remember when we moved the ruler, now is the time to backtrack, add an offset plane, and import that pick too. You can either add its geometry to the sketch you just made or create a separate sketch and project bits of the existing one to keep everything lined up. Pick whichever one is going to make things easier to model. Avoid modeling the same detail on multiple sketches. Always project instead. My first sketch is done and your ears are preached into oblivion. So let's move on to the next step. Draw the rest of the fucking owl. Import a photo, turn it into a sketch, extrude it, print it, refine it, repeat. Print test slices constantly and verify everything. Whenever you alter anything, test it in real life. When in doubt, test. When you're confident, absolutely test. Each one of these thin slices is like a gram of filament tops. You can print literally 1,000 of them. Do not get stingy. Test fit everything, and I mean everything, and always save directly before you print so the test and the file have the same version number. Always use the post-it note. You will forget a 2-digit number. There is some geometry you don't want to copy at all. In particular, you want to modify the design to fit whatever screws, springs, and other hardware you plan to use, not the hardware the original manufacturer used. Once all the photos have been imported, traced, and tested, we can finally enter the third dimension. Take those sketches and extrude, revolve, even pull a cheeky sweep, whatever it takes to reconstruct the real deal's geometry. Instead of thin little test slices, I actually recommend you build out the complete 3D geometry and then print the whole enchilada. This is gonna serve as a sanity check. We need the whole model to see how the various dimensions interact to make sure. But more importantly, we've put a lot of work into this project and we still have nothing to show for it. Finally, having a tangible object is a great boost of motivation, but seeing how it almost fits, it's so close. It creates a smaller goal that's tantalizingly close and can often motivate you through the entire rest of the project. You are gonna find lots and lots of problems, but don't get overwhelmed. We're gonna do this in pieces. Mark them down like you did before, pick a section, fix its issues, slice it off the model, and print just that part as a test. Once each section is out of problems, print another full prototype and look for more. As you test, be prepared to ditch your painstaking measurements and ignore your painstaking photos if it's clear it just won't work. For instance, the lever tended to explode when I jammed in the latch. The original has a pair of one-way teeth that let the little latch snap in but not pop out, but the printed version just snapped. Not only are these layer lines compromising the strength, the real deal is made of ABS, which is just more flexible than our PLA. I had to beef these up a few times, and even then, installing the latch was a real sphincter clenching moment. It actually would have been much better to not copy this at all and just redraw it from scratch. You'll see why. Sometimes the original does something in plastic that you could do better in hardware. For instance, the lever's axle, the fulcrum, is a pair of molded in pegs on bendable tabs. To assemble it, you flex these inwards and force the lever into the frame. This is way too rough for a 3D print. The tabs, frame, or both would split on a layer line, and besides, printing these pegs in would require basically the whole lever to be supported. So I replaced the tabs with a solid block, and I swapped the plastic pegs for screws. Same idea, but without the squeezing. When I said we were cloning things, I wasn't being completely accurate. The shift between materials and production processes forces us to alter the design. So if something seems too weak, too hard to print, or too heavy on the cleanup, don't copy it, adapt it. In the real deal, the latch catches on this little notch molded right into a rib on the frame. But it's so thin and it's at such the wrong orientation. The layer lines make it far too weak to ever possibly work. So I cut this element altogether, like literally with a Dremel. I replaced it with a screw drilled right through the frame. Obviously, this is not going to be the final design, but you don't have to print something to test it. Modding old prototypes can save tons of print time, and remember, the fix itself might not work either, so you want to test it before you commit time to adding it. For the real deal, I replaced this plastic rib with a slim 2mm screw supported by a pair of bosses. Now, the load gets applied to the perimeters instead of the layer lines, so we get the polymer's full strength. In theory, I didn't make the bosses thick enough to properly hold the screws, and because I didn't test rigorously enough, this is actually going to make it into the final draft. You'll see. If you find that something is hard to sketch, model, print, or assemble, you don't need to do backflips to perfectly replicate it or even adapt it. Sometimes, easy way do trick, and what could be easier than removing something altogether? Check out these springy side bumpers. In the real deal, these are separate strips of plastic tack welded onto the side. I am not totally sure why, so I just fused the frame and bumpers into a single unit. Don't be afraid to simplify the design. If you ever go too far, you can always backtrack and redo it the hard way. For instance, I didn't originally model these ribs running up the inside of the frame. I assumed they were there only to reinforce the sidewalls. It's the same with these holes on the bottom. I figured they save material and make it easier to pry this thing off the mold, right? Actually wrong. These are thermal relief. The hot swap cages have a fan that draws air in through the bays, and these gaps expose more of the hard disk surface area to the active cooling. My ribless hole-free version would have insulated the drive's thermal mass and made it much more likely to overheat. Adding the ribs back wasn't hard, and that's the point. If you doubt the pros and you end up being right, congratulations, you just improved the design. If you doubt the pros and you end up being wrong, you learn some professional quality product development tech. Continue refining, rethinking, reprinting, and soon your reconstructed replica will look and work almost identical to the original. It's time for the fun part. Eject the PLA and print a prototype in the proper material. My filament tier list has all the contenders, most of the contenders, I guess. So I would recommend you start there. I hopefully will remember to put a card up there, but I will definitely put a link in the description. I opted for my very favorite heavy-duty filament, 3D Fuel PCTG. They sponsored a recent episode and gave me a ton of filament, but it is the perfect material for this particular project. Hard disks heat up, and we're going to pack 12 of them nuts to butts and run them 24/7. The average operating temperature is going to be about 70 degrees, which is enough to soften PETG. And while normally this would be a job for ABS, ABS likes to warp as it prints. This tacoification phenomenon is especially bad on short, wide models with dense structures and sharp corners. Basically exactly what we're printing. PCTG matches ABS for heat resistance, but it's less likely to turn taco. I said earlier, you have to test whenever you change anything, even the material. My early prototypes fit too tightly in the hot swap bays, so I shrunk the springy side rails to compensate. It's because PLA is actually a very stiff filament, especially compared to the original, which was made in ABS. But I'm not printing in PLA or ABS. I'm printing in PCTG, which is even more flexible than either. Now the frame fits so loosely, we have ourselves a bit of a hot dog hallway scenario. This is why I keep saying, whenever you change anything, including the material, you always have to do another test. If there's a major problem, you do not want to have 14 copies of that. Instead of doing this, I said enough is enough, and I cranked out another 13 of them. After all the bullshit I went through last time, I had reached the end of my rope with this project, and the fact that I had just received this contraption that automatically swaps out build plates from a magazine and I wanted to use it in a project, pure coincidence. I immediately pressed them into service without even closely inspecting them. This is when I noticed the latch point retainer boss things were too thin and the screws were starting to bust free. So I slathered them with epoxy. It's fine. Everything's fine. You know everything's fine when I say everything's fine, because I only say everything's fine when things are fine. Nothing was fine. Turns out, F it we ball is not an acceptable substitute for hold it let's test. I had made so many mistakes of such monumental magnitude, I had to redesign and reprint every component of every sled. So earlier in this video, I showed how jamming the latch into the lever straight up blew the retention teeth apart. So I reinforced them and it seemed to solve the problem. Well, it only seemed to solve the problem. Roughly shoving tab A into slot B still riddled the teeth with hairline cracks. Within a few weeks, the steady force of the spring had pried them open into full-on fractures. Luckily, none of the ones that broke were loaded at the time, but I should never have implemented this at all. This like tab retainer one-way tooth thing is not just unprintable, it sucks. Look how sloppy and loose the real thing is. Ugh! I replaced these one-way teeth with a pair of screws. Not only will they not crack during assembly or wear out in use, they let me dial in the tension so every latch feels Why didn't they do this in the first place? Screws cost money. If you carve a half-cent off every item, the CEO can spend that on additional caviar. You'll also notice the underside of the lever is now a completely different shape. I assumed the original slim, irregular profile was there to improve the airflow. No, that is not the case. These vents are the only way in, and the air does not care if the vents are 1 millimeters thick or 10 millimeters thick. Or 1 millimeters. Wow, I'm not gonna reshoot that. Rosewell clearly also did this to shave off a milligram of plastic, but I just copied it verbatim and it made the print weaker and a nightmare to post-process. So I filled the awkward curve into a solid block and now the lever prints flat on the plate. It's stronger, it's faster, it prints almost ready to use with almost no cleanup. Yeah, it costs more, but like, I'm now a nickel away from my next mega yacht. Turns out there's not a lot of places to use a mega yacht in Colorado. You might notice the newer version has 1 row of air holes where the old version had 2. Again, I had unthinkingly copied this from the authentic article, even though it's obviously a bad decision because it blocks airflow. In the real deal, there is a reinforcing rib right in the middle of the ventilation slots, because if this reinforcing rib wasn't here blocking the airflow, they would have had to make the rest of this latch like a ½ millimeter thicker, and plastic costs money, you know. Usually I make mistakes when I move too fast and get too sloppy, but I had copied these stupid decisions meticulously. I think I trusted Rosewell's engineers more than they deserved, and the reason was probably cognitive dissonance. If you saw the last episode, or you've been listening to my belly aching all throughout this episode, you're aware of how much bullshit I had to snorkel through to acquire these fucking hot swap bays in the first place. To fix this proactively, I would have had to admit the finger quotes professional product I fought for tooth and nail was nothing but a flimsy, overpriced toy made by tightwads who would weaken performance critical structures and block important airways to shave off half a penny of ABS. The many times my intuition disagreed with their design decisions, I subconsciously gave them the benefit of the doubt because I didn't want to realize I was a chump. But after seeing how this played out and making these revisions, my bootleg copy was looking, feeling, and working better than the original across the board. And I realized I could make it even better. The ventilation slots on the lever are crucial for passing cool air over wheels of steel that are spinning full throttle forever. At least these slots are. These ones have a spring behind them, so all they do is collect dust that I have to poke out with a pipe cleaner. So I cut them out and replaced them with a feature that really should have been on the real deal in the first place: labels. The original only gives you like ½ a square centimeter to Sharpie in whatever waffle you're naming the drive after, and I had copied that stupid decision verbatim. But now that I was revising the lever, why not fix them? And now that I was reprinting the frames, why not make some fixes to that too? I could take the latch retainer screw bosses barely hanging on for dear life and make them extra thick. I had to reshape a surprising amount of the latch to make room, but this is work I should have done in the first place. Design kind of sucked. Allow me to wax philosophical for a moment. In the modern era, one of the most difficult assumptions to break is the implicit belief that corporations can make things better than users like you. Professionals do have much more training, resources, and expertise, but they don't serve customers. They serve their boss. Their boss serves investors. Investors serve themselves. The people who make the decisions that determine what products you can buy couldn't give the runniest, loosest shit about the worthless peons like you who exist as wallets meant to be raided. As you restore cut corners, overwrite sloppy engineering, and elevate your property till it meets your increasingly high standards, you'll start to realize how aggressively the modern world tries to railroad you into buying garbage. I paid real steel, big boy professional quality prices for a shit-ass plastic toy. There is no shame in realizing you got. I learned my lesson, and I tested this time. And this time, everything was phenomenal. The lever felt solid, the latch felt sturdy, the frame felt smooth but stiff as it snugly slid into its bay. This design was ready to start cranking out ad nauseum. So I cranked. I cranked for days. This gave me a little downtime, so I decided to do a little side project. When you capture an item so accurately, you can print interchangeable copies. You have also created the ultimate starting point to make accessories and mods. It only took half an hour to model a protective sleeve, complete with a little retention point that securely locks the drive in. But why stop there? I created a huge block of Gridfinity, I imported 4 copies of the sleeve, did a little rearranging, and voila, 4 drives worth of Gridfinity storage. And holy shit, I need half a spool. But this was so fast and easy to design, I had plenty of time to skeletonize it. Now, 2 reels of anti-static PLA can print enough Gridfinity to store all my spare discs with room for more. I'm not totally sure the anti-static was necessary, but I am over the Zack had a catastrophe storyline, and I'm pretty sure you are too. And yes, the storage rack itself is grounded through an outlet. I'm sharing everything I made here, by the way. The free files are all linked in the description if you also happen to buy this particular $400 piece of shit of a case. Never tell yourself your project is so specific nobody else could ever be interested. Someone else has the same problem. You're the only one who actually solved it. So share your stuff, watch other people use it, and experience the sheer joy of making another person's life easier by doing nothing except typing in a title that makes it clear your knockoff is not the brand name product. They say repetition is how you teach things. The time has finally come to finally finish my nightmare attached server, so as I assemble and install almost 30 hard disk sleds, I shall call you to action. Which spare parts do you plan to copy and print? Is there another 3D printing topic like this that you'd like me to make a video about? Let me know in the realms below. Thanks again to ArcStem for sponsoring this video. I want to see what you make, so share it at ark-stem.com. I get to make cool projects, shoot useful videos, and give it all away for free because we are supported by patrons like you. Each video, I thank 3 Random Lab Scientist supporters, and today's are Kelsey Comstock, Extrastellar Entity Labs, and Poop Town. Yeah, I wonder what their high school football team is called. I'm guessing the Poop Knives. Our mighty collaborators, the pinnacle of generosity, have earned themselves a permanent place in our workshop and an Easter egg hidden somewhere in this video. Thank you, SXP, The Suits Ruined Our Fun, Scott Reaney, Chuck Me Harder Baby, The Benevolent Misanthrope, Noodles, Shaleppy the Schwagster, Turner Zay, Original Gridfinity Etsy, Zachary Volpes, and introducing Kushan Heart Cherry. Well, I heart you. Finally, our lab assistants whose loquaciously sesquipedalian nomenclature necessitates truncation. Thank you, Ephrexis, Scroto, Crashdoom, Adam the Useless, I Don't Know What I'm Doing, Grurg, Quantum, Amma, Coat Duck and Friends, Kufa Soto, Reagan, T. Pizzy, Xanforian, Usually Funny, Keemau, Akalian Ice, A Trans Rights or Human Rights, Joseph R., Roger of the Great Star Theater, Jareth, Bill M., No Disassemble, Good Suck, Callsign Carrot, Sticks, Zach H., Iron Rain, Deorbital, Lydia K., Cliff H., VK2K, Eddie, Shortalos, Gridfy.cc, Norman Jaffe, The Krolster, Jean-Baptiste, Des B., The Monk, Viwatch, Ad Hoc Law, Bryn W., Reynold Hughes, Brad Cox, T. Kites, Onyx Plague, Bob Dobbs, Marcy Lovell, Michael C., Renakai P., Trans Rights, Make Fascists Afraid Again, Wuhan Express, Craft Computing, Pilgrim Labs, PRD, Agent Maxwell, Daniel M., Chris Sune, Moonkin, Bluetooth Repair, A Consignment of Geriatric Shoemakers, Evan K., Michael, Pup Geekware, CCH, Gareth, Lowen, Stormby, Michael H., Dr. Mrs. Nova, Ren, Shane F., Antitox, Dan R., DBD, William T., 6A6F, Zack, Leaky Auras, John Z, Clayton E, R. McKeel, Kevin D, Eric Jiggle Puffs, Elmore, Robert C, Robert B, Martin T, Spire, Talon, Sarah Clancy, Ergay, Dale B, Slippy McToof, Cowcaball, Burn Duck, Danny Devoid, Renaud B, Quality Doggo, Nuclear, King Shaming Walrus, Reenthused, My Only Dog Eats Mayonnaise, Mr. Melvinheimer, TR Fullheart, 3 Raccoons, SKL, Jack Moran, Ryrob, Sunburnt Cat, Alex P, Cold Dawn, Mike Kelly, Big Bird Tommy, Bill S, Larsmus Prime, Igor Box, Name Shortened Further, Max Luck, Talking Squatch, Dr. Lucifer, Zap the Cune, Cameron O, Sir Squeaky Cheese Waffles on a Boat with Extra Pickles and Jelly Bean Parade, new hard disk drive name confirmed, Haley K, Melvin, Aaron Steers, Period Clots, Rad Cookie Cad, Kermit, Leo Payton, Rusty Flute, Cameron R, Paul Gibbs, Hassan Mohammed, Horses Are Just Okay, Ice, and Blammo. That is a highly ominous juxtaposition. Thank you for watching, and I will see you and your creations in the future.